Welcome back, everyone. For today's deep dive, we're going to unpack a topic that's gotten seriously buzzy, the Agile Manifesto. We've got some really interesting excerpts here from DD's guide to Scrum Master that you all sent in. And I'm really curious to see what this guide digs into beyond the usual, Agile jargon.
Yeah, I think you'll find DD's guide offers some surprisingly insightful takes on these deceptively simple values.
Right, and that's what I love about this. These Agile ideas have, totally blown up beyond just software teams. But we have to remember, this manifesto came from a very specific problem.
Absolutely. Back in the late 90s, software development, it was a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
And methodologies like, CMSW, PMI, these were like the gold standard. Super rigorous planning, tons of documentation, processes for everything. Think like meticulous waterfall charts, Gantt charts, the whole 9 yards. But the issue was these approaches, they just weren't jiving with how fast software was changing. Everything was moving so much faster than these traditional methods could handle.
It's like trying to navigate rush hour with directions printed off MapQuest before smartphones even existed.
Yeah, exactly.
Good luck with that.
So in 2001, this group of, get this, 17 software developers, they were fed up. They got together to figure out a better way. And their goal wasn't to ditch process altogether, but to find a way to build software that was more, adaptable, something that actually responded to change.
And bam, the Agile Manifesto was born. With its 4 core values, putting people, collaboration, and flexibility front and center. And it starts with, and I'm quoting here, individuals and interactions over processes and tools.
Mm-hmm.
Which seems obvious now, but back then that was kind of radical, wasn't it?
It was a huge shift because for the longest time, everything was about meticulously defining each step, using all these tools to manage every single task. But the Agile Manifesto, it was like a breath of fresh air, reminding everyone that software, it's a human thing. It's about creativity, problem solving, communication.
Sure.
And no tool or process can replace that human element.
It's like, I don't know, having this amazing orchestra, right? But instead of letting them, jam and improvise, you force them to play from this super technical, super rigid score.
Exactly. A perfect analogy. And DD's guide really drives this point home, this focus on individuals and interactions, especially when it comes to the Scrum Master role. It argues that a good Scrum Master, they're less of a project manager and more like a facilitator, someone who empowers the team to communicate openly and actually solve their own problems.
See, this is already so interesting. So it's not just about having the right process. It's about cultivating the right environment for people to actually work together. Which makes me think about that second value, working software over comprehensive documentation. So does that mean Agile teams just chuck documentation out the window completely?
Not at all. It's more about, striking a balance.
Okay, yeah.
Agile recognizes that the most valuable thing you can have in software development is a working product. I mean, you can have stacks of documentation, but if the software doesn't actually, work...
Right, what's the point?
What good is it? Exactly.
Gotcha.
So it's about priorities.
Yeah.
Spending weeks perfecting a design document isn't as valuable as getting a basic version out there, getting it in front of users, getting their actual feedback.
Right, because then you can actually use it.
Precisely. And DD's guide actually takes this a step further. It encourages teams to think of documentation as a way to, support the development process, not to weigh it down.
I like that. Support, not burden.
Exactly. They recommend using more lightweight documentation tools, things like wikis, shared online documents that can be easily updated as the project evolves.
So documentation becomes this living, breathing thing that changes and adapts along with the software.
That's the idea.
Which, okay, that makes a ton of sense. But how does the customer fit into all of this? Because the third value is all about customer collaboration over contract negotiation, which feels like a huge departure from that old school hands-off approach.
Oh, it absolutely is. And I think this is where we really start to see how Agile goes way beyond just software. The old way of doing things was very, transactional. Define the scope, agree on a price, deliver the product. But Agile, it recognizes that the customer, they're an invaluable source of information and feedback throughout the entire process, not just at the beginning.
So instead of just tossing that finished product over the fence, you're actually bringing the customer into the fold, making them a part of shaping the final thing. Which has got to be a game changer, especially with those super complicated projects where, the requirements, they kind of morph as you go.
You got it. And it all comes back to that core Agile idea, being cool with change. Which brings us to value number 4 from the Agile Manifesto, responding to change over following a plan.
Okay.
But now, this doesn't mean you just say, to heck with planning altogether.
Right, right.
It's not about just winging it. It's about acknowledging that in any complex thing you do, whether it's software, launching a product, even writing a book, unexpected stuff, it's gonna happen.
Happens every time.
The market shifts, tech changes, or you get hit with a bolt of inspiration that takes your project in a whole new direction, right?
Totally. So how do you bake that responsiveness, that ability to pivot into a plan? Isn't that kind of an oxymoron?
That's the cool part about Agile. It encourages you to break down those big, hairy projects into smaller, bite-sized chunks, iterations. These iterations give you these built-in checkpoints to be like, okay, how's it going? Get some feedback, make tweaks as needed. DD's guide actually uses a cool analogy to explain this. They compare it to, get this, sailing a sailboat in the open ocean.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me about this sailboat thing.
Okay, so picture this. You're sailing across the Atlantic. You've got your destination in mind. You've charted your course, right? But any sailor will tell you, you can't just like set sail and follow that line perfectly. We're constantly adjusting your sails, dealing with changes in the wind, got to navigate around storms. Agile's like that.
Makes sense.
It's about having a roadmap, but having the flexibility to adapt when conditions change.
It makes you wonder why we aren't using this Agile stuff in every part of our lives.
Yeah.
I mean, who hasn't made a super detailed to-do list only to have it, like, completely fall apart by 10 a.m.?
Right. But it's so true. These principles, they apply way beyond just software. Think about any goal you've ever set. Writing a book, training for a marathon, even something as simple as cleaning out your closet.
Ooh, decluttering. Now, there's a project that could definitely use some Agile thinking. I get so overwhelmed I end up doing nothing.
You and me both. But what if you tackled it with an Agile mindset? Instead of getting bogged down by the sheer size of it, you break it down, right? Smaller chunks, more doable, maybe start with just one drawer or one corner of a room. And instead of shooting for this like magazine perfect level of organization, just focus on making small improvements.
So you're constantly moving forward, even if it's just one drawer at a time. And I imagine you're getting feedback as you go, right? Like, this system for my socks, not really working. Maybe I need to rethink this.
Exactly. That constant feedback loop, it lets you learn, it lets you adapt as you go, which is way more effective than just stubbornly sticking to a plan that's clearly not working anymore.
It's like that old saying, the best laid plans
Often go awry. Exactly. And that's where this Agile approach it really shines. It gives you the tools to deal with that uncertainty and come out on top.
It's almost like, I don't know, philosophy for life as much as a project management thing.
I think you're onto something. Because deep down, Agile, it's about embracing a certain way of thinking. One that values being able to adapt, to collaborate, to always be learning. And those are qualities that can help us in all areas, right?
No doubt. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Agile Manifesto, what's the one thing you really hope our listeners take away from today?
That's a great question. You know, it's easy to get bogged down in the jargon, the specific ways of doing things in Agile, but the real magic, it's in those underlying principles. Because whether you're coding software, launching a business, even just trying to handle the craziness of everyday life, these ideas, they're key. Putting people first, valuing solutions that work over rigid plans, seeing change as an opportunity, those are the things that help you thrive in a world that's always changing.
I love that. So well said. You know, it makes me think DD's Guide to Scrum Master. It's not just a book about software. It's like a guidebook for dealing with anything that's messy and unpredictable, which is, let's face it, pretty much everything.
You said it. And I think that's why this Agile Manifesto, it stood the test of time. It's not about a bunch of rules. It's about principles. Principles that you can adapt, that you can apply in so many ways.
So to everyone listening, we'll leave you with this. What part of your life could use a little more, well, agility? Where could you stand to be more open to change, to prioritize working together, to break down a huge task into smaller steps? We'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories. Until next time on The Deep Dive, keep exploring, keep learning, and stay agile out there.